Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1: A Fatal Fall. The morning began with a sound that Londoners did not often hear in their bustling city streets, a sharp cry, followed by the dreadful thud of a body striking the pavement. It happened just after 8 o'clock, when the sky was still pale with early light and the air smelled of damp stone and coal smoke. The unfinished building on Kingsway, a tall frame of steel and concrete, had been the centre of much talk. 12 stories already stretched into the sky, with the promise of more. It was to be a monument of progress, the newspapers said, though the labourers themselves muttered about poor conditions and dangerous scaffolding. This morning, however, progress came to a halt. A crowd gathered swiftly at the foot of the structure. The body lay sprawled in a ghastly stillness, one arm twisted unnaturally, the other still clutching a broken mason's hammer. The foreman, a red-faced fellow with a thin moustache, kept shouting, "Keep back! Keep back! For the love of heaven, give him space!" But the crowd pressed closer. A constable arrived, blowing his whistle, and soon an inspector followed. The dead man was identified at once, Ahmed Khan, a mason of some repute among the workers. He had been known for his precision, his steady hands, and his unwillingness to cut corners. "It is a bad business," muttered the inspector, shaking his head. "But plain enough. He must have stepped too near the edge. 12 floors up, what chance has a man got if he slips?" Yet, almost before the dust had settled on the street, the word suicide began to spread. Rafik, a wiry labourer with restless eyes, declared loudly, "I told you all, Ahmed was not himself these last days. He spoke of debts, of worries at home. Poor fellow, he must have decided to end it." The foreman, overhearing, nodded as though this explained everything. "Aye, that fits." A man troubled in his mind, best to close the matter quickly. But not everyone agreed. Among the workers, whispers stirred. Ahmed had been cheerful only yesterday, eating bread and cheese with his mates, laughing at a story. One of them muttered, he wouldn't do it. Not Ahmed. He had children. He was saving every penny for them. The inspector, however, seemed content with the easier explanation. He made a note in his book, ordered the body taken away, and promised to file his report before noon. To him, it was one more unfortunate accident, or one more desperate man choosing the quickest escape from life's burdens. Yet fate, in its curious way, had placed another figure nearby that morning. Seated at a small café across the street, Hercule Poirot was enjoying his customary breakfast, rolls so neatly buttered they might have been cut with a ruler, and coffee dark enough to suit his taste for precision in all things. He had come not to watch construction sites but to meet an acquaintance from Scotland Yard later that day. The cry, the crowd, the commotion, these had drawn him, against his usual dislike of disorder, towards the edge of the café terrace. And when Poirot saw the figure upon the pavement, his keen eyes sharpened. "Monsieur Khan, is it?" he asked a bystander, catching the name. "Yes, sir," the man replied. "A mason. Fine worker. They say he threw himself down." Poirot's eyebrows rose. Threw himself. He twirled the ends of his moustache with delicate care. Always they are so quick to say it is suicide. Yet do they not know, mon ami, that a man does not end his life without leaving the smallest trace of despair, of preparation, of farewell? None. It is too convenient, too hasty. The matter interests me. The bystander, half amused, half intrigued, shrugged. The inspector seemed sure. Poirot straightened his tie. The inspector may be sure. Hercule Poirot is not. By now the workers were being herded back into the building, the constables dispersing the crowd. Poirot lingered, observing. He saw the foreman's nervous glances, the way Rafik talked too eagerly, repeating his claim that Ahmed was burdened with debts. He saw, too, the solemn faces of other men, who did not echo Rafik's words but avoided contradicting him. Poirot approached the inspector with his neat bow. "Monsieur, might I introduce myself? Hercule Poirot." The inspector blinked. "Poirot or the detective?" "Well, sir, it seems straightforward, but if you'd care to cast your eye." "Indeed," said Poirot, "I would care very much. A man's honour, his reputation, are of no small account. To call him a suicide when he is not, that would be unjust. And Poirot does not permit injustice where he may prevent it." The inspector, a practical man, allowed Poirot to step closer to the site. With meticulous care, Poirot bent, examined the broken hammer still clasped in the stiffening fingers, the dust upon the boots, the position of the limbs. His gaze lingered upon the left hand, bent as though it had grasped for something in vain. He touched the rail nearby. There was a faint smudge, as though a hand had pressed hard. He straightened. "We shall see, we shall see. But I tell you this, Inspector, if this man fell of his own choice, then Hercule Poirot has lost the gift of the little grey cells. And that, I assure you, has not happened." Later that day, Poirot was visited at his modest London flat by a woman wrapped in black shawls. Her voice trembled as she spoke. She was the widow of Ahmed Khan. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "they tell me it was suicide. But I know my husband. He was not a man to take his own life. He was proud, careful, devoted to our children. I beg of you, find the truth." Poirot bowed with grave courtesy. "Madam, you have come to the right man. For your husband, and for justice, I shall look with the eyes that see not only what is there, but what is missing. We shall discover whether it was truly the despair of the man, or the hand of another, that sent him down from the heights." And thus, from a single fall on a grey London morning, began one of Hercule Poirot's most curious investigations, the case of the mason who would not have chosen to die. Chapter 2. Poirot arrives. The following morning, Hercule Poirot rose earlier than usual. He polished his moustaches until they shone like black enamel, selected a grey suit of fine cut, and adjusted his pocket square with military precision. His destination was not one he relished, the half-finished tower on Kingsway, where dust and grime clung to everything, and where the air held the ceaseless din of hammering and the clang of iron. But Poirot never allowed discomfort to hinder the pursuit of truth. By 8:30 he was standing before the site. The great frame of steel and stone loomed above, its incomplete windows gaping like hollow eyes. A hoist creaked as workers hauled sacks of cement. The foreman, clipboard in hand, barked orders in a voice hoarse from years of shouting. Men in stained overalls carried timber, pipes, and tools with practiced rhythm. Poirot's patent leather shoes drew a few curious stares as he stepped gingerly over muddy ground. His small, upright figure seemed oddly out of place amid the bulk and roughness of the labourers, yet his presence commanded attention. He approached the foreman with a slight bow. "Monsieur," said Poirot, "permit me to introduce myself. Hercule Poirot." The foreman, Mr. Bartlett, looked startled, then wary. "Oh, or the detective, eh? I was told you might come poking around. Look, sir, I'll tell you what I told the inspector yesterday, it was an accident. Or suicide. Either way, there's no mystery here." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, but that is just it, monsieur." To Hercule Poirot, there is always a mystery until the little grey cells have declared otherwise. "Now, would you be so good as to show me the place from which Ahmed Khan fell?" Bartlett hesitated, then shrugged. "If you insist. Follow me." Together they climbed a series of narrow staircases until they emerged onto the 12th floor. The wind whistled through the skeletal beams, carrying with it the smell of dust and fresh mortar. Poirot paused, adjusting his hat against the breeze. The spot was marked only by a faint smear of chalk on the timber near the edge, left by the constables. Poirot crouched delicately, examining the plank and the iron rail that bordered it. His fingers brushed the surface, feeling for irregularities. "You see, monsieur," Poirot murmured, "there is a scuff here, very slight, as though a boot slipped. Yet there is also the mark of a hand, pressed with force upon this rail. A man stumbling by chance? Or a man resisting a push?" Bartlett shifted uncomfortably. "I wouldn't know about that. These things happen, sir. Men lose their footing all the time." Poirot stood. His gaze fell upon the workers nearby, who were busy mixing cement and shifting bricks. He studied their faces, their movements, the unspoken tensions that hung in the air. Finally he pointed towards a wiry man stacking timber. "And that one, monsieur, the fellow with the restless eyes." "Who is he?" "Rafik," Bartlett replied. "Labourer. Been here 6 months. Hard worker, though not exactly friendly." Poirot nodded slowly. "Très bien. I think I should like to have a little word with this Rafik." Rafik came when called, wiping his hands on his trousers. His eyes darted from Poirot to Bartlett, then back again. "You are Monsieur Rafik?" Poirot asked pleasantly. "Yes," the man muttered. His voice carried a hint of defiance. "You were acquainted with Ahmed Khan?" "Of course. Everyone knew him. Good worker. But troubled. Always worrying about money, about debts." "Debts, you say?" Poirot's brows lifted. "How curious. For his widow tells me he was saving most carefully. You were aware of this?" Rafik hesitated only a fraction, then shrugged. Men do not always tell their wives everything. Poirot's eyes, bright and sharp, swept down to the man's boots. They were scuffed and streaked with cement, but here and there was a faint dust of brick-red colour, the same shade as the plank Poirot had examined near the ledge. He filed the observation away without comment. "Tell me, monsieur," he continued gently, "when you saw Ahmed fall, where were you standing?" "Close by," Rafik said quickly. He was at the edge." He looked strange, like he was thinking of something far away. Then he stepped back and he mimed a sudden drop with his hand. Over he went. Poirot inclined his head gravely. "Merci. That is all, for now." As Rafik walked away, Poirot turned to Bartlett. "You see, monsieur, how swiftly he tells the tale, and how eager he is to assure us it was suicide. The eagerness, it is interesting, n'est-ce pas?" Bartlett frowned. "You don't think?" Poirot lifted a hand. "I think nothing yet. I only observe." Poirot spent the next hour speaking with other workers. One, a young apprentice named Tom, admitted nervously that he had not seen much at all. "I was carrying a load of bricks, sir. By the time I heard the shout, he was already falling. I can't say if he jumped or was pushed." Another man, older and quieter, shook his head. Ahmed wasn't the type to take his own life. He was strict, yes, sometimes too strict for the others. But a good man. I can't believe he'd just do that. Poirot listened carefully, never interrupting, his head inclined, his moustaches twitching slightly when something caught his attention. At last, when he had spoken with all who had anything to say, he returned to the rail where Ahmed had fallen. The sun was climbing higher now, throwing long shadows across the beams. Poirot looked down at the street far below. To fall from such a height, he said softly, is no small thing. A man would not choose it lightly. And yet, if it were murder, who profits? Who is saved by Ahmed Khan's silence? Bartlett, who had lingered nearby, muttered, "Well, Ahmed was always complaining about safety, about men not doing things properly. He was threatening to report some of them to the site owners. Made him unpopular, that did." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, voila. That is something. A man of order, surrounded by those who resent it. Monsieur Bartlett, I thank you. Already the picture begins to take shape." He straightened his tie once more, his mind busy with the fragments he had collected. A chipped hammer, a scuff on the timber, boots with red dust, a labourer too eager to declare suicide, and a man of honour silenced in the very place where he had sought to maintain order. Poirot gave a small sigh. Yes, it becomes most intriguing. An Hercule Poirot does not chase phantoms. There is truth here, hidden beneath the dust of this place. We shall find it. Thus ended Poirot's first full morning on the site. The men went back to their labour, muttering in low voices. Some looked anxious, others indifferent. Only one man, watching from the shadows of the scaffolding, clenched his fists tighter than he realized. Poirot had stirred the ground, and secrets were already beginning to shift uneasily to the surface. Chapter 3, The Widow's Words. The rain had begun to fall by the time Hercule Poirot arrived in Whitechapel that evening. The narrow lanes were slick with water, reflecting the glimmer of gas lamps in puddles. Children darted between carts, their laughter carrying faintly even through the drizzle, while women drew shawls tighter against the damp air. Poirot, small and neat beneath his immaculate umbrella, stepped carefully along the cobbled street until he reached the modest brick house where Ahmed Khan had lived with his family. The door was opened by a boy of perhaps 12, his dark eyes wary but polite. "Your mother?" Poirot asked gently. The boy nodded and disappeared inside. A moment later, a woman came forth. She was slim, with grief etched deeply upon her face, but her posture was upright, dignified. She gestured for Poirot to enter. Inside, the house was plain but orderly. A faint scent of spice lingered in the air, and the furniture bore the marks of careful maintenance. On the mantel stood a photograph of Ahmed in his work clothes, hammer in hand, his expression serious but steady. "Madame Khan," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I am Hercule Poirot. I believe you expected me." She inclined her head. "Yes, monsieur. I thank you for coming. They say my husband took his own life. But I do not believe it. He was not that kind of man." Poirot removed his hat, placing it precisely upon the table. He seated himself, adjusting his cuffs. "Then you shall tell me about him. Everything you can. It is the small details, madam, that illuminate the truth." She sat opposite him, hands folded tightly in her lap. Ahmed was a proud man. Too proud, sometimes. He worked hard, never cheated, never cut corners. He would say, if a wall is not straight, then a man's soul is not straight either. He believed his work reflected his honour. Poirot inclined his head. A man of order, then. Such men are rare and valuable. And at home, madam? Was he cheerful? Content? She gave a faint smile, broken by sorrow. Yes. We are not rich, monsieur, but he was content. He would save every coin for our children. He spoke often of their future, of sending them to school. He was no gambler, no dreamer. He had no debts, only plans. Poirot's eyes glimmered. That is very interesting, for I have heard from certain mouths that he was burdened with debts. Lies, it seems, to explain his death with too much convenience. Her hands clenched more tightly. They dishonor him even in death. Courage, madam, Poirot said softly. It is often so, the truth is buried under fossard, but the little grey cells will uncover it. Poirot's gaze moved to a small wooden chest near the wall. "May I?" he asked politely. She nodded. Poirot opened the chest and found, carefully arranged within, a mason's tools, trowels, chisels, levels, hammers. Each gleamed with cleanliness. Poirot lifted one, turning it gently in his hands. It bore no trace of rust or dirt. "Your husband was meticulous," he observed. "Yes," she said. "He cleaned his tools each night. He said a tool reflects the man who uses it." Poirot examined further until his hand fell upon one hammer that was not quite so perfect. Its head bore a fresh chip, small but sharp, and there was a faint smear along its handle. Poirot held it to the light. "This one," he murmured. "It is different." She frowned. That hammer was his favorite. Always in his hand at work. "Why is it broken?" Poirot placed it carefully aside. "That, madam, is what we must ask. A man of order, who keeps everything in its place, yet here we see disorder, damage. Such things speak, if one is willing to listen." The widow lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "He came home 2 nights ago, troubled. He said little, only that some men mocked him for being too strict. He said he would not bend, that rules kept men alive. I thought no more of it, and now—" Tears welled in her eyes, but she brushed them away quickly. Poirot's expression softened. "Your husband was a brave man, madam," he said. "Brave men often make enemies among the careless. But do not despair. We shall uncover the truth. His honor shall not be left in doubt." He rose, smoothing his coat, then paused. "One more question. Did your husband receive letters, perhaps? Notes? Anything unusual in the past week?" She thought carefully, then shook her head. "No letters. Only the foreman's messages about work." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Bon. That is useful. It tells us the matter is one of the site itself, not of outside affairs." As he prepared to leave, the eldest child, the boy who had opened the door, spoke quietly. "Monsieur Poirot?" "Yes, my little one." "My father always said," the boy whispered, "that if anyone hurt him, we should not be afraid to tell the truth. He said lies are like crooked bricks, they cannot stand long." Poirot bent slightly, his eyes warm. "Your father was a wise man. And we shall see that his words are fulfilled. Lies, yes, they tumble down. The truth, it stands." He gave a small bow to the widow. "Courage, madam. Grief is heavy, but justice will lighten it. I promise you this, Hercule Poirot does not fail when honor is at stake." Out in the rain again, Poirot walked slowly, umbrella tilted at just the correct angle. His mind was busy, assembling the fragments. Ahmed Khan, a man of discipline, order, and pride. A family depending on him. No debts, no despair. A hammer chipped in recent struggle. A widow certain of his innocence. Poirot's lips curved in a thin smile. So. Already the threads twist together. Someone feared Ahmed Khan's honesty. Someone sought to silence him, and sought also to stain his name with falsehood. ABN. It will not succeed. Poirot will not permit it. The drizzle quickened, pattering upon his umbrella, but Poirot hardly noticed. He had the scent now, faint but undeniable. The puzzle had begun to take its true shape. That night, in the comfort of his small London flat, Poirot placed the chipped hammer upon his desk. He regarded it as though it were an object of art. A broken hammer, a scuffed plank, a man too eager to shout suicide. These are not random, none. These are the steps of a dance, each leading to the next. And soon, Ah, very soon, Hercule Poirot shall know the name of the dancer. He folded his hands, the gleam of determination in his eyes. Chapter 4, or the Witnesses. The following day dawned clear and bright, as though London had decided to wash its face after the night's rain. The streets glittered with puddles, and the sharp air carried the smell of wet stone. Poirot, punctual as always, arrived at the Kingsway building site precisely at 9 o'clock. He had already spoken with many of the labourers in passing, but today he desired to question more formally those who claimed to have seen Ahmed Khan's fatal fall. It was here, in their words and silences, that the truth, or at least the first cracks in falsehood, would emerge. The foreman, Bartlett, was the first to come. Poirot arranged a makeshift chair for himself upon the 12th floor, his small figure upright, his gloves immaculate, as though he were presiding over a court rather than a half-built tower. The foreman stood before him, shifting awkwardly, hard hat in hand. "Now, monsieur," Poirot began with perfect politeness, "you were among the witnesses to poor Ahmed Khan's fall, yes?" Bartlett nodded. "That's right, sir. I was working 2 floors below, but I happened to look up. I saw him leaning out too far, then he seemed to lose his balance. Down he went." Poirot's moustaches twitched. 2 floors below? Yet you saw so clearly." "Well, not every detail," Bartlett admitted. "But enough. He'd been in a funny state of mind, see. Stood too close to the edge." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "You say it's a funny state of mind. What gives you this impression?" Bartlett scratched his neck. "It was what Rafik told me. Said Ahmed had debts. Said he'd been brooding." Poirot leaned back. "So you did not observe the melancholy yourself, you accepted another man's report." The foreman flushed. "Well, I suppose so." Poirot gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Already the story showed cracks. Bartlett, eager to pass responsibility, leaned on another man's words. Next came Rafik himself. He swaggered into the space, his manner a shade too bold, as if defiance could protect him. His eyes flicked about, never quite meeting Poirot's for long. "Rafik," Poirot greeted smoothly, "you were close when Ahmed fell, were you not?" "Yes," Rafik said quickly. "Very close. I saw his face. He looked troubled, far away in thought. Then, he stepped back. Too far. Over he went. It was suicide. I'm sure of it." Poirot raised a finger. "Ah, suicide," again the word comes too swiftly, like a bird trained to fly at a whistle. "Tell me, monsieur, what did Ahmed say before this? Did he speak words of farewell? Did he cry out?" Rafik hesitated. "No. Nothing. But he looked different. As if the weight of the world was on him." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but sharp. "You are observant, monsieur. You see much in a man's face. And yet, when I spoke to Ahmed's widow, she said he was cheerful the very morning of his death. How do you explain such contradiction?" Rafik shrugged, his lips tight. "A man can hide things from his wife." Poirot allowed the words to hang in the air, then nodded graciously. "Indeed. That is possible. Merci, monsieur." But as Rafik turned to leave, Poirot's eyes followed him, noting again the red-dusted boots, the twitch of unease in his shoulders. The man's insistence rang too loud, too rehearsed. Last of all came the apprentice, Tom. Barely 20, with earnest eyes and hands still awkward in their work, he looked nervous before Poirot's gaze. "You also witnessed the fall, mon ami?" Poirot asked kindly. Tom shifted on his feet. "Not really, sir. I was carrying bricks along the opposite side of the floor. I heard a shout, turned, and he was already falling. I saw the end, not the beginning. Très intéressant. Then you cannot say whether he jumped, slipped, or was pushed. No, sir. I wish I could, but I can't. Poirot studied him a moment longer. The boy's eyes were clear, his voice honest. You are wise, monsieur, not to invent. Already there are too many inventions in this tale. Tom flushed, then blurted, I don't believe he killed himself. Everyone knew Ahmed was steady. Strict, yes, but fair. He wouldn't just, he gestured helplessly toward the open air. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Thank you, my young friend. You have spoken more truth in a few words than others in many. When the interviews concluded, Poirot remained seated, gazing out across the half-built structure. The workers had returned to their tasks, but their voices carried faintly through the scaffolding. Always, you see, he murmured to himself, it is the contradictions that speak. The foreman sees too clearly from too far away. The laborer insists too loudly on despair. And the boy, he admits he knows little, and so he speaks honestly. Poirot rose, brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve. He walked to the rail again, running his fingers along the cool iron. The scuff marks remained, faint but telling. His mind replayed the testimonies, Bartlett looking up from 2 floors down, Rafik standing near, Tom arriving too late. If Ahmed had slipped, he thought, there would have been no need for stories of debts and gloom. If Ahmed had leapt, his widow's testimony and his careful savings argued against it. But if Ahmed had been pushed, then everything fell into place, the eagerness to claim suicide, the contradictions, the too clear memories. Poirot stood for a moment, moustaches bristling in the breeze. It begins to form, this puzzle. Yes, yes. Already I see the pattern. But patience. One must never pluck the fruit before it is ripe. Later, as he descended the staircase, Poirot encountered Bartlett again. The foreman scratched his head. Do you really think it wasn't suicide, sir? Poirot gave a thin smile. I think, monsieur, that it is most unwise to think too quickly. A wise man allows the facts to assemble themselves. And when they are ready, then the truth presents itself, shining and complete. Bartlett looked unsettled, but said no more. That evening, Poirot dined alone at his favorite small restaurant, his napkin tucked precisely, his cutlery aligned. As he ate, he reflected. 3 witnesses, he murmured. 1 too far to see, 1 too eager, and 1 too late. Between them, they weave a net of falsehood and truth. My task, Tujas, is to separate the strands. He sipped his coffee, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. The widow's words, the boy's honesty, the chipped hammer, these are true. The debts, the despair, the clear view from far below, these are false. Already, Hercule Poirot feels the weight of the finger that points. Soon, very soon, I shall know toward whom it points. He set down his cup with delicate finality. But for now, patience. Let them speak a little longer, let them reveal themselves. Murder, like a badly laid brick, always cracks with time. Chapter 5, Shadows on the Site. The Kingsway Tower stood silent at dawn, its skeletal beams silhouetted against the pale sky. London was only beginning to stir, milk carts rattled along cobblestones, the air smelled of wet smoke and bread fresh from the ovens. But Hercule Poirot was already there, his polished shoes tapping the pavement with precise rhythm. He had requested, through Inspector Dale, permission to examine the building privately before the clamour of work began. The inspector, sceptical but curious, had granted it. And so, Poirot found himself alone among the echoing scaffolds, a small figure moving carefully, as though entering the scene of a performance where every prop spoke its line. Poirot placed a gloved hand upon the iron rail of the 12th floor. The city stretched below, rooftops damp with dew. He looked down, imagining Ahmed Khan's last moments, a man working steadily, bent to his task, then suddenly over the edge. Accident? Suicide? Or a hand unseen, but felt with terrible force? He crouched, immaculate trousers creasing neatly, and examined the plank once more. Yes, there it was, the faint scuff where a boot had slipped, not forward, but sideways, as though resisting pressure. Poirot smiled faintly. A man falling by chance, he murmured, leaves confusion, perhaps broken timber. But a man who resists, he leaves a mark of struggle. Voila! Poirot straightened and paced slowly, each step measured. His eye swept across the site, noting how tools were strewn carelessly now that Ahmed's order no longer ruled. Here a saw left on the floor, there a level discarded on a pile of bricks. He clucked his tongue. Without the man of precision, there is chaos. It is a sign, mon pauvre Ahmed, of how much they resented you. He paused at a corner where cement sacks had been stacked. A faint dusting of brick-red powder trailed from the pile toward the rail. Poirot bent, touched it with his fingertip, and nodded. The same red dust he had seen upon Rafik's boots. Mais oui. Always the footprints. Men do not think of what they carry with them. The dust betrays them as surely as a signature. The silence of the unfinished building was broken by a sound, a faint creak above. Poirot glanced upward. A plank on the higher scaffold shifted in the breeze. For an instant, Poirot imagined a body hurtling downwards, limbs flailing, ending in silence. He shivered, though not from the cold. Murder at such a height was a brutal thing. The killer needed only a moment, a push, and gravity did the rest. Yet brutal did not mean clever. Cleverness lay not in the act, but in hiding it. And already, Poirot thought, the killer had not hidden it well. As the sun climbed, workers began to arrive, voices echoing up the stairwells. Poirot, still on the 12th floor, folded his hands behind his back and watched them gather. He noted their glances at him, some curious, others resentful, a few uneasy. One man muttered, "Why's he poking about again? Isn't it settled?" Another replied, "Not for him, it ain't. They say he's never wrong." Poirot pretended not to hear, but inwardly he smiled. Fear among the guilty was like a lantern in the dark, it always revealed itself. Later, Poirot asked the foreman, Bartlett, to demonstrate how the workers carried materials along the ledge. Bartlett obliged, hefting a sack of cement upon his shoulder and walking a narrow plank near the edge. Poirot watched intently. "You see, monsieur," Poirot said at last, "a man burdened with such weight keeps his balance carefully. If he slipped, he would fall forward, with the sack dragging him." But Ahmed carried no sack at the time. His hammer was in his hand. And yet, he fell backward. Non. Something is not as it should be. Bartlett frowned. "I hadn't thought of that." "Precisely," Poirot replied. "That is why you have me." Poirot then examined Ahmed's hammer once more, which he had borrowed from the widow. The chip upon its head caught the morning light. He pressed it against the iron rail, the edges fitted almost too neatly. Tiens. The hammer was struck here, in haste or in struggle. A man defending himself, perhaps. Or a man grasping at anything while pushed. He returned the hammer to his pocket with great care, as though it were evidence in a trial yet to come. By midday, Poirot withdrew to a shaded corner of the site, where he sat upon a crate with his notebook. He wrote not facts in the ordinary manner, but observations couched in questions. Ahmed, proud, orderly, meticulous. Would not choose disorderly death. Widow, certain of no debts, no despair. Hammer, chipped, used in struggle. Rail, handprint, scuff, red dust. Witnesses, contradictions, Bartlett, too clear, too far, Rafik, too eager, Tom, honest, too late. Motive? Ahmed threatened to report unsafe practices. Whom would that endanger? Poirot tapped the notebook with his pen. It narrows. Yes, yes, it narrows. As the afternoon waned, Poirot asked discreet questions among the men. A few were reluctant, but one older worker, his face lined with years, spoke quietly. Ahmed was strict. Too strict for some. He told the foreman last week he'd write to the site owners about lads cutting corners, cheap mortar, unsafe scaffolds. Rafik especially didn't like him. Said Ahmed was making life harder. Poirot thanked him, his mind alight. So, it is not despair that killed Ahmed Khan. It is honesty. And honesty, Ms. Amis, is a dangerous thing when surrounded by the careless. As the workers packed up at day's end, Poirot remained, gazing across the city bathed in evening gold. The scaffolding cast long shadows, stretching like skeletal fingers. He folded his arms and let the wind ruffle his immaculate hair. Shadows, yes. They cling to this place. But they cannot last. Already, I see light piercing them. He whispered the names under his breath. Bartlett, who sees too much. Tom, who sees too little. And Rafik, who sees what he wishes us to believe. Which of them hides the hand that pushed? Poirot's moustaches bristled. The answer comes soon. The little grey cells work silently, but they never rest. That night, in his tidy flat, Poirot sat by the fire, his shoes placed precisely side by side, his notebook before him. He poured himself a tisane, the steam rising gently. Murder, he reflected aloud, is often born not of passion alone, but of fear. Fear of losing one's place, one's livelihood, one's secret. Ahmed Khan threatened order upon men who thrived in disorder. And for that, Poirot's eyes hardened, he was silenced. He closed the notebook with a snap. But shadows cannot hide forever. Soon the guilty man shall stand revealed. Chapter 6, False Trails. Rumours are like smoke, they drift through the air, filling every corner, until one can no longer tell where the fire truly burns. In the days following Ahmed Khan's death, the Kingsway Tower buzzed with gossip, each man eager to offer his own explanation. And Hercule Poirot, with his usual patience, allowed the smoke to swirl about him. At the site, one worker whispered that Ahmed had borrowed money from a betting shop in Shoreditch. Another swore he had quarrelled bitterly with a cousin over an inheritance. A third insisted he had been drinking heavily in the week before his death. The stories multiplied, each more colourful than the last. Poirot listened gravely, nodding, his moustaches twitching as though in sympathy. But inside, his little grey cells arranged the tales neatly into a single category, les bêtises, nonsense. Still, nonsense was not without value. Lies reveal as much as truths, for they show where men seek to deflect suspicion. Poirot made his way through these rumours as carefully as a gardener pruning roses, clip, discard, and see what remains. First, the story of debts. Poirot had already examined Ahmed's ledger in the widow's home, neat entries of savings, no sign of gambling or loans. The handwriting itself was calm, precise, steady to the end. A man planning suicide does not keep accounts with such order. Poirot smiled to himself. Non. Ahmed Khan was a mason of stone, but also of character. His wall stood straight. Next, the tale of family quarrels. Poirot paid a discreet visit to Ahmed's cousin, who kept a small shop in Stepney. The man was astonished at the suggestion of quarrel. Ahmed? We never fought. He was more like a brother. We had plans together, he was helping me repair this very shop. He talked only of the future. Whoever says otherwise lies. Poirot accepted tea, complimented the cousin's courtesy, and left satisfied. Another false brick removed from the wall of deception. Then there was the matter of drink. Poirot spoke with the landlord of the public house nearest the site, a shrewd woman with sharp eyes. Ahmed Khan, she said, polishing a glass. Came in once or twice, maybe, but never touched more than a ginger beer. Said he didn't hold with drink, said it dulled the hands. Whoever tells you he was drinking is spinning tales. Poirot left the pub, his lips curving in amusement. So. Again the smoke vanishes. By the end of his inquiries, Poirot saw the pattern. The rumours had one common source. Each man who repeated them had first heard it from the same lips, Rafik. Ah, le voilà. Poirot murmured. He scatters falsehood as a farmer scatters seed. But it grows too quickly, too evenly. One sees the hand that sows. Still, Poirot was too wise to pounce too soon. A murderer cornered too early grows desperate. Better to let him believe his stories were working. Poirot returned to the site, strolling with apparent idleness, pausing to admire the view, complimenting the strength of the beams, chatting lightly with the workers. The men grew accustomed to his presence, though some muttered he was wasting time. Bartlett, the foreman, confronted him one afternoon. Begging your pardon, sir, but don't you think you're chasing shadows? The inspector's ready to close the case. Says there's nothing in it. Poirot smiled. Shadows, monsieur? Perhaps. But even shadows reveal the shape of the thing that casts them. Bartlett shook his head, muttering, strange little man, as he walked away. That evening, Poirot sat in his flat, polishing his shoes with deliberate care. To Hastings, who had joined him for supper, he spoke in measured tones. My dear Hastings, do you see the beauty of it? The lies point not to despair, but to fear. Rafik fears the truth so much that he invents a dozen fictions. The more he protests Ahmed's misery, the clearer becomes Ahmed's peace of mind. Hastings frowned. Then you're sure Rafik pushed him? Poirot lifted a finger. Patience. One does not accuse until the picture is complete. To accuse without proof is to build a wall with missing bricks, it collapses. We wait. The next day brought a curious development. A letter reached Poirot, unsigned, warning him to leave the matter alone. The handwriting was clumsy, the words misspelled, but the intent was plain. Poirot examined the letter with interest. Ah, Hastings, the enemy grows nervous. That is always a sign one approaches the truth. Hastings scowled. Dashed impudence. What will you do about it? Poirot placed the letter neatly in his pocket. What do I do? But of course, I continue. When one receives such a letter, one knows one is on the right path. At the site, Poirot set another small trap. He asked Bartlett to show him the ledger of attendance, records of who worked which shifts. Flipping through, Poirot noticed something. The day Ahmed died, Rafik had signed in early, an hour before the others. Curious, since he often arrived late. Poirot closed the book with satisfaction. So, Monsieur Rafik, you prepared the stage well before the play began. Yet Poirot did not neglect other possibilities. He considered Bartlett carefully. The foreman had much to lose if Ahmed reported unsafe practices to the owners. His story of seeing too much from too far was suspicious. But Bartlett lacked the nervous energy Poirot always observed in the guilty. He seemed more weary than afraid. And weary men, Poirot reflected, they lie to save themselves trouble, not to save themselves from prison. The young apprentice Tom was dismissed quickly from Poirot's list. The boy's honesty was evident, he lacked guile. If anything, Poirot pitied him, for he had been made to witness a horror he scarcely understood. No, the smoke of lies all curled back to one fire. Poirot stood again upon the 12th floor, gazing at the scuff marks on the timber, the faint red dust still clinging there. He closed his eyes and let the scene play in his mind. Ahmed stands near the edge, hammer in hand. Another man approaches. Harsh words exchanged. A shove, sudden and brutal. Ahmed resists, his boot sliding, his hammer striking the rail. But gravity claims him, and he is gone. The murderer, breathing hard, sees the mark, the dust, the hammer. He knows evidence remains. And so he begins at once to spread lies, debts, quarrels, despair. Suicide. Suicide. Until the chorus drowns the truth. Poirot opened his eyes. But you see, monsieur, lies are like poor mortar. They crumble at the touch. That evening, as he left the site, Poirot caught sight of Rafik watching him from the shadows, eyes narrow, jaw tight. Poirot raised his hat politely, as though greeting a mere acquaintance. But inside, his little grey cell sang with certainty. The mask slips, mon ami. Soon, very soon, we shall strip it away entirely. Poirot returned to his flat with measured steps. He had allowed the false trails to wind their course. Now they led him straight to the heart of the matter. The next stage was clear. He must gather all, confront the lies, and reveal the truth in the light of day. Chapter 7. Gathering the Threads. A chill wind swept through Kingsway on the morning Poirot summoned the foreman and the principal witnesses to gather in the unfinished tower. Clouds hung low, threatening rain, and the skeletal structure loomed grey against the sky. To many of the workers, the idea of returning to the place where Ahmed had fallen still felt uncanny, yet the presence of Hercule Poirot gave the proceedings a sense of inevitability. Inspector Dale, stiff in his long coat, stood beside Poirot. Though skeptical, he had grown intrigued by the little Belgian's quiet certainty. "So, Poirot," he murmured, "you think you'll have your answers today?" Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his eyes sharp. "Mais oui, mon cher inspector. Today the lies crumble, and the truth stands." One by one, the men arrived, Bartlett the foreman, his brow furrowed, Tom the apprentice, nervous but earnest, and finally, Rafik, his swagger a little forced, eyes darting restlessly about the site. Poirot greeted each with perfect politeness, bowing slightly, and then gestured towards the 12th floor. "If you will indulge me, messrs, I wish to conduct a little experiment. It will not take long, but it is necessary." The climb was slow, boots echoing on the stairwell. Poirot, neat as ever, ascended at his own steady pace, arriving without breathlessness though the younger men puffed behind him. On the 12th floor, the group gathered in a loose circle. The wooden planks creaked underfoot, and through the gaps, one could glimpse the dizzying drop below. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Gentlemen, we are here where poor Ahmed Khan met his death. The official word has been suicide. But suicide is an untidy thing, and Ahmed Khan was not an untidy man. I beg you to indulge me as I show why the truth is otherwise." Rafik let out a short laugh. "With respect, Monsieur Poirot, everyone knows he jumped. Why waste our time?" Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Everyone? Or perhaps only you, monsieur, who has said it so often?" Rafik shifted, but said nothing further. Poirot walked slowly to the rail, the very spot where Ahmed had fallen. He gestured delicately. "Observe, messrs. Ahmed was a mason of discipline. He kept his tools immaculate. Yet behold, his hammer, chipped, damaged. Why? Because in his final moments, he struck against this rail. He held up the hammer, the small chip glinting in the grey light. See how neatly it matches the mark here. This is not the act of a man throwing himself willingly into the void. It is the act of a man resisting, struggling. Tom's eyes widened. Then he fought back. Precisement. Poirot nodded gravely. He was pushed. Bartlett muttered, "Good Lord." Poirot continued, his voice calm, precise. "Now, we consider the witnesses. Monsieur Bartlett, you claim to see Ahmed fall from the far side. Yet the distance makes such clarity improbable. Your account is coloured, perhaps, by your desire to end questions quickly." Bartlett looked down, shamefaced. "I didn't want trouble for the men. That's all. I didn't see it properly. Just him falling." Poirot inclined his head. "Just so. And Monsieur Tom, you saw little because you arrived late. You are honest, I think. You say only what you saw." Tom nodded vigorously, grateful for Poirot's words. Poirot turned at last to Rafik, his gaze keen. "And then there is you, monsieur. You claim to be nearest, that you saw Ahmed leap of his own accord. Yet, your story does not hold. You were here earlier than usual that day. The attendant's ledger proves it. Why, I ask, would a man with a reputation for lateness arrive so early?" Rafik flushed. I wanted to get ahead with my work." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Or perhaps you wanted time to prepare. The red dust upon your boots matches the dust upon the rail, where you scuffed it while struggling with Ahmed. And more, every rumour, every false story of debts, of quarrels, of drink, they all began with you. You scattered them like seed, hoping they would grow into certainty. But lies, monsieur, are like poor mortar. They crumble." Inspector Dale stepped forward sharply. "Are you saying this man, Rafik, killed Ahmed Khan?" Poirot lifted a finger. "Patience, mon ami. The truth must be placed brick by brick, so it stands firm." He looked once more at the group, his voice rising with quiet authority. "Consider motive. Ahmed threatened to report unsafe practices. He would not bend, not compromise. He was the straight wall among crooked ones. And you, Monsieur Rafik, resented him deeply. He made your work harder, your corners fewer. You feared he would cost you your position, perhaps the favour of the foreman. And so you sought to silence him forever." Rafik's face had gone pale, though his voice remained defiant. "You've no proof. Words only. You cannot hang a man on words." Poirot smiled coldly. "Ah, but proof, it exists. The hammer, chipped in struggle. The rail, with dust from your boots. The attendant's record. The lies that circle always back to you. Each by itself may be small. Together, they form a pattern, clear as the tiles in a mosaic. And Hercule Poirot, he never misreads a pattern." For a long moment, the group was silent. The wind whistled through the beams, rattling loose planks. Rafik shifted, his bravado crumbling. Bartlett looked grim, Tom pale. Inspector Dale fixed his eyes on Rafik, sharp as steel. Finally, Rafik burst out, he was going to ruin everything. Always complaining, threatening letters, talking like he was better than us. He left me no choice. The words hung in the air, damning as any confession. Poirot lowered his head, almost sadly. "You see, Messrs? Even now, he cannot resist. Guilt, it speaks louder than silence." Inspector Dale stepped forward. "Rafik Ahmed, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder." The young man made no move to resist, only hung his head as the inspector led him away. When they were gone, Poirot remained by the rail, looking down at the street far below. The city bustled on, indifferent to the drama above. "Poor Ahmed," Poirot murmured. "A man of order, destroyed by disorder. But his honour is restored. That, at least, we can give him." Tom approached timidly. Monsieur Poirot, thank you. His family, this will mean everything. Poirot placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Remember him, mon petit. Remember that truth and precision are worth defending, even when they make enemies. Bartlett, grim but respectful, nodded. I see it now. He was right all along. We should have listened. Poirot straightened, smoothing his coat. ABN. Justice is never perfect, but today, at least, it is served. That evening, in his flat, Poirot sat by the fire with Hastings once more. He stirred his tisane thoughtfully. It is curious, mon ami, he said. Men think murder requires cunning. But most murderers are clumsy. They forget the small details, the scuff of a boot, the chip of a hammer. It is these little things, so easily overlooked, that shout the loudest to Hercule Poirot. Hastings shook his head in admiration. Dash it all, Poirot, you're right every time. Poirot's eyes twinkled. But naturally. It is not I who am clever, Hastings. It is simply that I listen to the truth that lies in order, and to the lies that betray disorder. And in the end, always, the truth stands. He raised his cup in a small toast. To Ahmed Khan, the mason of stone, and of honor. Chapter 8, The Final Revelation. The parlor of Ahmed Khan's modest home was filled with a heavy silence. Outside, rain pattered against the window, a steady rhythm that seemed almost solemn. The widow sat in her chair, her children close by, eyes fixed anxiously upon Hercule Poirot. Inspector Dale occupied a stiff-backed seat near the fire, notebook closed, though his expression was attentive. Bartlett, the foreman, had been asked to attend, and he stood awkwardly, cap in hand. Poirot, as ever immaculate, sat upright, fingers steepled, moustaches shining with careful wax. His gaze swept the room, calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, he began softly, we are gathered here to bring an end to the shadow that has hung over the name of Ahmed Khan. For too long, it has been whispered that he took his own life. But today, I tell you, it was not so. He was murdered. A murmur passed through the room. The widow's hand tightened around her son's. Bartlett bowed his head. Inspector Dale nodded for Poirot to continue. Poirot lifted the hammer from the table where it lay, polished but still bearing its fatal chip. This hammer is our first clue. Ahmed kept all his tools in perfect order, always clean, always whole. And yet, this hammer, his favorite, is damaged. Why? Because, in the final moment of struggle, Ahmed struck it against the rail. That mark upon the iron, it matches exactly. He did not leap willingly, he resisted. He set the hammer down with precision. Next, the scuff upon the plank. It tells a story. Ahmed's boot slid sideways, not forward. That is the mark of a man pushed, a man striving to keep his footing. Suicide leaves no such sign. Accident leaves confusion. But struggle, it leaves resistance. The widow's eyes brimmed with tears, but they were tears of vindication. Poirot inclined his head to her gently. Poirot's voice grew firmer. Then, the lies. One man spread tales that Ahmed drank, that he gambled, that he quarreled. Lies, every one of them. His accounts are precise, his family at peace, his habits sober. The publican confirms it, the cousin confirms it, the ledger confirms it. The lies are smoke, designed to obscure the truth. And when all smoke comes from one direction, what do we know? That there is fire beneath. He paused, letting the word settle. Bartlett muttered, Rafik. Precisement, Poirot said. It was Rafik who sowed these stories, who arrived early on the day of death, who lingered near the edge. It was Rafik whose boots carried the same red dust that marked the rail. he placed himself too near, too eager to speak of suicide, too quick to shape the narrative. In doing so, he betrayed himself. Inspector Dale added quietly, and when pressed, he confessed enough to seal it. Poirot turned now to Bartlett. His eyes, though not unkind, were keen. "And you, monsieur? You gave an account of seeing too much from too far. You wished only to avoid trouble, but in doing so, you allowed suspicion to fall unjustly upon Ahmed's own character. You must live with that. Yet you are not guilty of murder." Bartlett swallowed hard, his face red. "You're right, sir. I was wrong to say more than I knew. He deserved better." Poirot inclined his head gravely. "The straight wall, monsieur, must always be honoured. Ahmed was such a wall." Poirot now addressed the family directly. "Your husband, your father, he was no man of despair. He was a man of order, of dignity. He stood for safety, for honesty, for the future of his children. He was silenced because he would not bend to carelessness and corruption. His honour, madam, is untarnished." The widow wept silently, but her tears now bore a glimmer of relief. "Thank you, monsieur. You have given him back to us." Poirot bowed his head deeply. "It is the least justice demands." Inspector Dale cleared his throat. "Well, Poirot, I'll admit it. I thought it suicide myself at first. But you've picked the case clean as a bone. No jury will doubt it now. Rafik will stand trial, and rightly so." Poirot smiled faintly. "You see, mon ami, it is not a matter of grand gestures. Murder leaves behind the smallest of traces, a chip in a hammer, a scuff on wood, a tale told once too often. It is in the order, the symmetry, that we find the truth." Dale chuckled ruefully. "And here was I, looking for something grand." "Non, non," Poirot said. "Always it is the little things." The conversation ebbed, and soon Bartlett excused himself, promising quietly to speak to the site owners about stricter oversight, in Ahmed's memory. Inspector Dale departed soon after, the matter now firmly in the hands of law. The family remained, thanking Poirot with words simple but sincere. When at last Poirot stepped back into the rain-washed streets of Whitechapel, he carried with him not the pride of triumph, but the quiet satisfaction of a man who had set crooked bricks straight. That evening, in his immaculate flat, Poirot sat before a glowing fire, Hastings beside him. A plate of petits fours lay untouched as Poirot sipped his tisane, reflecting aloud. "My dear Hastings, do you know what interests me most in this case?" "What's that, Poirot?" "That it was not passion, not greed, not even hatred that drove the crime. It was something smaller, and in some ways more terrible, laziness. The desire to cut corners, to avoid the discipline of order. Ahmed Khan was murdered because he stood as a reminder that work must be done properly, honestly. And such reminders are uncomfortable to men who prefer disorder." Hastings frowned. "So in the end, it wasn't a great conspiracy, just one man, afraid of being exposed." Poirot spread his hands. "Exactment. It is often so. Murder is rarely magnificent. It is petty, squalid, ugly. But the truth, that is magnificent. It restores dignity where lies sought to destroy it." Poirot leaned back, moustaches bristling, eyes gleaming. "Ahmed Khan's name is cleared. His widow and children may hold their heads high. The company shall think twice before tolerating unsafe practices. And the murderer, he will answer before the law. That, Hastings, is order restored. And Hercule Poirot, he lives for order." Hastings raised his glass. "To Ahmed Khan, then." Poirot lifted his cup of tisane, his voice quiet but firm. "To Ahmed Khan, the mason of stone, and of honor." The fire crackled, the rain fell, and in the small, ordered world of Hercule Poirot, justice had once again prevailed.